So when it comes to artificial intelligence, as another example, the opposite spectrum of the example that you gave, natural world, we could say, like, if we, there's a certain degree of linearity, but let's say the another extreme would be, what about artificial intelligence? So artificial intelligence doesn't have intelligence of its own. It doesn't even have energy. So unless that artificial intelligence is charged constantly by some kind of external form of energy, it's always, but always, inert. So therefore, all these talks about artificial intelligence taking our lives over should be taken with a pinch of salt. Very good example, because this is something I pondered myself. We here take this on the assumption that human nervous system, human neurophysiology, becomes the ultimate expression where that, what we speak of as awareness, can fall back onto itself. Whereas I trust by natural world, you refer to all that what is, the kingdom of minerals, plants, and animals, which all exist in their suchness, right? The crystal is expression of consciousness in its suchness as crystal, let's say, and there is also degrees in crystal in the mineral kingdom, in the coefficient of hardness to the degrees of, let's say, right, when this, let's say, some of the precious stones, how they came into being, to the kingdom of plants, right, microorganisms, to some marvelous creatures like tigers and elephants. They exist in the suchness of that what the tiger represents, elephant, a dog, a bird, any particular variety. So in other words, of course it's an expression of consciousness, and we can make a gross here assumption somehow that this is somehow imperfect. It's perfect in its own right as an expression, but it is only in human that this, where consciousness can fall back onto itself. In tiger there is no possibility. So therefore, we, like where your question proceeds from, we could say, if that assumption is taken, right, at the face value, that indeed humans are ultimate expression, then that is true. If we don't agree on such presupposition, then of course and there are these perspectives as well. There are these perspectives that there's absolutely no difference whatsoever. The ant is just as much as consciousness as human being. But to me, they are inconsistent with what we here express. Because whether we like it or not, it also belongs to that whole area, right? That whole area of what it means actually to be human. So first of all, we need to establish that, what it means to be human. And when we delve into that deep enough, then the argument of equality of ant and human being is being resolved from a very different point of view. Not in terms of that tension, in terms of the, let's say, impact of the human civilization on the natural world. It is understood at a very different level that never was the time when there was a human as an independent agency. So something else is at play, something else is playing itself out. So you see, there are layers up, which need to be peeled here to address this question. You could have also given another example, for example, which there are a lot of talks out there now, with regard to what about artificial intelligence, right? There are lots of talks these days, progressively, I would say in the last maybe 10 years, but now becoming almost accepted. What is being accepted? There is this notion that artificial intelligence already reached or about to reach a level where it will become aware of itself. Have you heard of that? I've heard about it only maybe 2 years ago. And it struck me, something to reflect on. And of course, from where I understand what it actually means to be human, what the human physiology here is, then that is a complete nonsense. It's a complete nonsense that artificial intelligence can become aware of itself. You see? What is the most common and immediate debunking of that? It's paradoxically, in the most bizarre way, simple. Even if the proponents will jump in to defend that, oh, no, don't worry about it. Of course, yes, I know. There is chi, there is prana, yes, that we are moved not by, there is, there will come a time when these so-called robots, this AI, would be fed on by plugging themselves to the source of energy like the sun. But they forget that that's only a gross aspect. To any medium-level aspirant of Vedic studies knows that energy here has the degrees, gradations. So it's not just the energy of the sun which charges, let's say, a solar battery and then warms up the house and all the equipment in the house. That's only that level of energy. There's another level, that energy, that why we're functioning, how we function here, is all prana regulated, prana related. The whole entire our organism is linked to the intelligence of each individual cell in its connection to the larger movements of prana. There's an extraordinary level of understanding here opens up in terms of where the true vistas for wellness, well-being, health, treatment opens up, right? Which is not opened at all to the world of allopathic treatment. So when it comes to artificial intelligence, as another example, the opposite spectrum of the example that you gave, natural world, we could say, if we, there's a certain degree of linearity, but let's say the another extreme would be, what about artificial intelligence? So artificial intelligence doesn't have intelligence of its own. It doesn't even have energy. So unless that artificial intelligence is charged constantly by some kind of external form of energy, it's always, but always, inert.
So it would be like Baikari without the other three behind it.
Exactly. A very good example. A very good example. It's just a surface level of affairs. So therefore, all these talks about artificial intelligence taking our lives over should be taken with a pinch of salt. Yes, I also agree with the views that they will progressively become, most likely, more and more sophisticated. More and more sophisticated, right? But I've seen so far the most sophisticated movement of the robot, right? Robot, in terms of the movements. Remember how the first robots were like, there were even dances in the 80s. Remember? I could never do that, but, it's looking so cool, like. And then this was always thrown, to the makers, like, come on, and they're becoming more and more, so it's like emulating almost the gracious movement of. yeah, well, you know, so imagine that hitting the key, you know, of the piano, of the keyboard, right? Like, I mean, you kid me not again, right? That robot who is still pouring you tea, spilling all over the cup, you know? And of course, we marvel at that. Oh my God, what a level of artificial intelligence here, the robot serving me tea. See? So that also as an opposite spectrum of the example here, simply because there are a lot of talks, and sometimes it can become perplexing, and some people have also asked, and there were these discussions. So are we at the, is the next frontier where we kind of will become a subspecies, because there will be this perfect species, which are much more perfect because they can repair, right? They can kind of self-service themselves. We cannot do that. We constantly, of course, we can do that, but in our own nature-designed way, right? And if the culture becomes against the health, and it's becoming very difficult to remain healthy in unhealthy culture. But one of the most immediate way of looking at it is that if we have a very superficial understanding of what we are as human beings and the functioning of our physiology, then this conversation of artificial intelligence, of course, it's very tempting, and it kind of makes sense, because it can be spoken in terms of software, right? Our bodies are like this suit in space. It's like the body is something we wear. So it's the adaptability of the body, how well the body is made, and we can improve it. So the next level will be this upgrading the artificial intelligence with our consciousness, right? So we don't need a formula how to remain young forever. We don't need to fight against the constant nature's language of dying. The constantly dying, constantly something dying, constantly terminating itself, right? Pablo Picasso never put flowers into water. He always put them, straight into a vase with no water. And when asked, why do you do that repeatedly? It's kind of, it's like, he says, they're gonna die anyway. They are to die. So, no water, okay? It's a kind of yagya, it's a kind of a true puja, because flowers are not meant to be put on the altar in the water. You destroy the flower when you do the puja, right? Picasso had his own weird ways of kind of articulating this, So that temptation that, well, if all this is at the level of templates, and all this is just the body is a suit itself, body is here as that software which is upgradable, why don't I wear the most extraordinary suit? Experience taking place elsewhere anyway. I don't need to spend millions for arresting the natural process of aging. I will wear another suit. That's the level of conversation. That's the kind of ethos. Transhumanism, exactly. Upgrading upgrading maybe, but literally downloading one's consciousness into a machine. And it's an alternative conversation with artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence conversation is that it reaches the point where it becomes aware of itself. And there are films already made. It's now a subject which is kind of spilled out. It's no longer spoken in closed doors. This is like now being communicated, like the doomsday is coming. It's going to be like literally humans at the mercy of this dehumanized world, because our skills will be good for nothing. Only few operators will remain in the hierarchy of that pyramid. Others will have no access to it. So it's kind of like alien scenario of the early years of Ridley Scott. And then the next conversation is having the perfectly designed bodysuit. And then consciousness can just migrate constantly. But this is only because our current understanding, the prevalent understanding, is extremely narrow and limited. Not at all consciousness-based. So therefore these conversations are. But if one has sharp enough needle, one can burst that bubble in no time. Burst that bubble there and then. It does not hold ground whatsoever and never will. I mean, I will sound, at the risk of sounding categorical, there will never be artificial intelligence. Never, ever. There's only one form of intelligence: consciousness. We're playing, yes, the toys may become extremely sophisticated, but the sophistication of these toys does not make them into a grown man, woman, right? Because he knows it's a toy to play with. Whilst something else is happening, the core of all this, what we are here, is elsewhere. So it's, in a way, to me, it also serves, as you rightly said, it's the vicary level to taking to its ultimate. It's distracting. It's to taking conversation at that level. It's distracting from the real job, real endeavor, real purpose of why we're here. So, and there's no lack of funds at the moment. It's the same like exploration of other planets. The more we think truly, critically about exploration of our planets, the more it should make us geocentric in our perspective. And unless we're lazy and complacent and don't want to think and want to take things at the face value, that just because we read too many books or watched too many films, that it's just like hop on an intergalactic spacecraft and we'll land somewhere in a suitable planet. Within the conversations of any astrophysics, whether this is back in the Soviet Union or in the United States, countries were trying to conquer space in its race to domination of the space, it is known as internal conversation. Human body is not designed to function in space, period. It's not designed. It doesn't matter what conditions we can provide there, even if we simulate gravity, because without gravity, our skeletal structure will decompose itself. Well, simply our bones will break down, because it needs to have gravities, you know. That's why, like at some age, they say you need to add pressure to the bone structure for it to remain healthy, for it to absorb minerals, calcium, magnesium, and zinc. Yes, exactly. It's the domain of Tamaguna. So you can simulate that, but it's not going to be at the level which also gravity at the superficial level, at the gross level, is gravity. But there's something else going on. There's an energetic connection. Then oxygen is the next thing. And environment. Every astronaut or cosmonaut who came back after a prolonged period of time there not only had to go through a prolonged phase of rehabilitation in terms of the functioning of their body after they've been exposed to the zero gravity conditions, but also every single functioning of their organism and above all else deterioration of their mental capacities. Because, and it doesn't matter, billboards, like when I looked at this, I can oh, I can have a screen which will simulate this landscape. But it cannot. Because I'm in that landscape even through the windows. Even in this building, I feel I am part of this environment. And that part of the environment is what we are, again, in non-holistic systems. All these intergalactic travels become just a fancy to become true. In reality, it doesn't have a chance. So it should make us geocentricus. See? Geocentricus. So we actually start to appreciate Earth and see Earth as the center of the universe. Not because it's inconsistent with modern understanding of cosmology. No, because it's required from the point of view of downright psychology, healthy psychology. So it's a philosophical system which is actually helps us to connect to who we are. So the Earth as the center of the universe, with all the layers around it as in medieval times, now being reevaluated and looked into, and some discoveries are made that actually this is the model that used to be a model of macrocosm and microcosm. Whereas with Copernicus it was replaced. Ptolemean system was replaced for system which Copernicus came back with, and later Newtonian system. So we're still living in the hiccups of all this, not truly understand that the shift in our perception with regard to reality didn't do us much service, because it simply severed us from that understanding of the centrality of what is taking place, and scattered us and our culture to the peripheral state of affairs which we are now dealing with. So all these attempts at still reaching out into the space or reaching out into the domain of most sophisticated electronics and still belongs to that same paradigm of somehow we are going to outsmart nature. There is a way to outsmart. There is a way to leapfrog out of this predicament. So it's an interesting one, very interesting one. And the thing is that people who, I hope, that's my hope, who pound millions and billions into this, they, I'm sure, prefer to have a real house like this, garden, olive trees, a good olive oil, right? They don't drink artificial intelligence olive oil. Maybe they do, I don't know. Right? So it's like kind of contradiction there. One can find contradiction in how often people want to live their life, and they have, and they can afford to live their life, and they do. And that what they back up, what they finance, is a totally different, completely. Instead, like, you know, why? Oh, fantastic, finally, you know, God's answering our prayers now. Bill Gates is buying agricultural land in the United States. All of it. He is going to restore agriculture. Is he? So these are the big questions. See? So this is where it's all kind of interconnected. Because truth be said, if there were truly forward-thinking powers out there with tremendous resources of, like, let's say, likes of Elon Musk, instead of catapulting things up into the air, right? Kind of like, you know, this in itself is, you know, like a big car. It's an extension of one's libido. Always has to be an extension of one's libido. If one is somehow feels impeded, it needs to have a rev to compensate for that. You know? So it has to have, you know, 100,000 of horsepower, you know? in the same way, to have that erectile thing that shoots into space, it's still kind of a kid playing with the remote control, dilly-dallying here, because if there was indeed this cutting edge, then one would begin to invest into agriculture, truly speaking, because we messed up the agricultural land per se, and this is linked to so many problems on the level of digestion, of kind of allergies, and it's all linked. The way our stomach is lined, the stomach, digestive process here, is linked directly to the state of the soil. When the soil is messed up, it doesn't take just 2 years to rest. Let the soil rest, and then it will regain its level of nutritional value, speaking that clinical language, for it to be providing us with all the oligoelements we require. No. Nobody knows how long it takes for that fertile level of soil to restore its balance, equibalance. Some say minimum, Vandana Shiva, remember that warrior lady? Somewhere I heard 50 to 150 years minimum it will take to restore for the soil truly, that ecosystem, you see? So this is where the true exploration of Mars, the true exploration of artificial intelligence. So therefore, it is indeed, thank you, it is ultimate expression of shifting things at the surface level, still playing toys while the real area and field for where the human creativity can be applied now. Well, age we live in also, Parapashyanti, Madhyama and Vaikari can be superimposed on the ages, the Manvantaras, the gold, the silver, the bronze and iron. So the age of ignorance is the age of Vaikari, the age of when the truth is perplexed.